In Philosophie Positive, as Auguste Comte, the father of positivism, called his system, thus indicating that it's a philosophy, specific philosophy, only claiming to be the one neutral philosophy, we get introduced to strategy, which is used by a great many schools, and very notably the school of the logical positivism, which, however, is not represented so much, in fact, by the persons Maurice Schlick and Ernst Mach, M-A-C-H, who are usually pointed to, but I believe G.E. Moore and Bertrand Russell are really the core of that movement. And then the people that are more overtly identified with it, A.J. Ayer, for instance, are in fact of lesser importance. So far as the practical or factic or extroverted, let's call it, or Zuhanden is concerned. So if we really look into it, then we could say there's certain points in A.J. Ayer or in some of his close collaborators, Godfrey Vesey, for instance, which are really more valuable than the things anything we find in Russell. That could be. But I'm just saying de facto, and so far as human practice is concerned, one thing is true, and another thing may be, if we say what the issue really is, the aletheia of it, bring it out, say what the law really is, the law is, we'll find out it's something different than what happens to be the current interpretation. So thinking of the Sheehan interpretation of Heidegger, one comment I want to make is that the metaphor of the looking at the world through a glass, which seems best to fit something like that Heidegger says is the Newtonian view, but which also goes seemingly as well with the Cartesian view, because of extension as being identified with reality, and then extension also being identified with measurement, even as late as in the great German physicists who identified it with measurement. So that those two, so that Descartes and Galileo can be superimposed one way or another, and you get the same situation in terms of the way we're understanding what the basic science is about. So the difficulty here is then that if we view Heidegger as being opposed only to that, we miss that this view also links up all the way back to the Socratic Platonic view, which can then point back to the Pythagoreans. Aristotle has said Plato is a Pythagorean, and then to their progenitors in the Egyptian hierophants, which, however, are interpreted to have been in this condition by the Athenians of of death, of the equivalent of death. In other words, all their sensual needs are both overcome through winked quasi winked or um, yeah, victory over the self is victory, um, or he who conquers the self conquers. So conquers worthy of the name, as it were, in a philosophical sense. So Socrates could drink as much as he wanted, or not drink as much as he wanted. He was brave in war, but he could also flee if he thought it was more to his advantage, like he describes in one of the dialogues as a strategy of, I think, the Persians. Not sure, I don't remember exactly. But in any case, that both the self-conquering of the self is implied in philosophy, but also sort of a equanimical repose, a situation of, I think of the Blue Mosque or so in Samarkand, and scholars sitting at their ease in a court. So that this image of death, which is really death to the life of politics, or to the realm where the noise of the doxa or the common opinions is raging, where you could think clearly, is then added to that the character of Socrates, who is meant to have conquered himself and therefore to be able to think clearly. It's then put forward as a platform. So it's just that the Newtonian and the Galilean thinking happens to have arisen also assuming the rest of it. Is that we fulfilled these parts and then we came up with this teaching. But Heidegger is against that. Even the first beginning that claims those conditions are the original most needful thing.